Why do the Nuggets have the NBA trophy under lock and key? Plus, we'll talk about the shape of the Western Conference and why I have the Mavericks as high as I do. Plus, talk a little bit about Colin Gillespie and what the season looks like for him. All this and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on whatever platform you've chosen. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can leave us as 5-star reviews. Or if you're catching the show live on YouTube, as I record this around 2:40 Mountain Time on Tuesday. This is Tuesday's edition of Locked On Nuggets. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and I'll be rolling solo today. Tomorrow, we will have me and Swipa doing a show together. So that'll be a lot of fun. Going to be recording that one actually tonight. So I'm doing like 2 shows in the span of a couple of hours, but the podcast won't be up until tomorrow because that'll be Wednesday's episode. Okay, on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about the story about the trophies. Thank you for off-season content. Thank you, Toronto Star. We'll talk a little bit about the shape of the Western Conference, and people were very surprised about where I had Dallas. I'll explain a little bit more about why I have them where I have them. And we're going to talk a little bit about Colin Gillespie and what I kind of see from him this season, what that might mean for him this season. I want to let you know, thank you if you have joined us in the YouTube channel. Folks like Malik Moore, Dragutin is in here with us. Ted's in here. Hurricane hanging out with us as always. 5'5"-ish. I'm just calling you 5'5" now-ish because that's the easiest way for me to say that now and going forward. We'll talk about it going forward. Let's start today with a conversation about the trophy. The Toronto Star reported that Jamal Murray is not allowed to bring the Larry O'Brien championship trophy home to his town of Kitchener in Canada. This is per Nuggets media relations director Nick O'Hare. I've known Nick for a long time, since I got to Denver. Quote, "Our owners have had it under lock and key since we won, and no players or staff are allowed to take it anywhere." Nuggets media relations director Nick O'Hare wrote, "The players don't take the trophy like the Stanley Cup. It doesn't make the rounds or get passed around." Can I just say how dumb this is? Like, okay. The Cronkies deserve a ton of credit. They told everybody that the criticisms of them were unfounded and that they could build championship teams their way. And they did it twice in 2 years. They have won 2 championships with the Avs and the Nuggets in back-to-back seasons with their approach to everything. They deserve credit. That trophy belongs to them. They are the ownership group that brought championships to Denver and the first Nuggets title in history. Now, I don't understand. This is not uncommon. I want to be very clear on this. This is not like an uncommon thing. I get emails all the time from these teams, and sometimes the Larry O'Brien trophy is taken all over the place. The Bucks in particular did some really cool stuff when they won the title. They would have events where you could go out and you could see the trophy and you could touch the trophy and you could actually be with it. It was brought on like team events. They let like the mascot handle it. And the Nuggets are like, no, Jamal Murray, you who averaged 30 points on 50, 40, 90 in the Western Conference Finals, you can't take it out to Kitchener. On one hand, I get it because it's pretty precious. And if it got lost, that would be a problem. But guess what? These are adults. These are professional men. And Jamal could hire a person for a week whose entire job is just to handle the trophy with like severe penalties if it were to get lost. He could hire an army of bodyguards for a week to take it home and just watch the thing. You got to let these guys like celebrate with it. I don't necessarily think that Nikola wants to bring the trophy home to Serbia, even though the Serbian fans might want to see it. I don't think Nikola cares about that. But I do think that Jamal really wanted to bring it back to Kitchener. And it's a bummer that he wasn't able to do it. The Stanley Cup, one of the coolest things about it is the reverence for the cup. And I didn't really understand it until my wife kind of informed me everything, because she's a super hockey fan and a hardcore psychopath Avs fan. Like, she teaches English at CSU and goes from like mild-mannered and talking about like, how can we build a better, more peaceful world, to screaming obscenities at every player and the officials on the other team, like screaming for blood. she explained to me how important the cup is and all the cool stuff with it. Like, she got legitimately teared up at the Avs championship parade when she saw the cup. The NBA just doesn't do that. Like, they do not hold the trophy in that kind of regard. And like, this to me is an area where the focus on players, again, does another disservice to the NBA. It's not that I don't think you can have a league centered on players. You can and you should. The NBA should be about the players. But what do we talk about? Rings, right? We talk about rings with players. We don't talk about trophies for teams. And that to me is a little bit of a bummer, because this should be an opportunity for a very meaningful title to be shared and spread around. It does not belong locked away in a trophy case in the suite that the Cronkies occupy at Ball Arena. Like, that's just not where it belongs. Take the thing out. Let the people see it. Let the fans that have followed Jamal his entire career and became Nuggets fans for that be a part of that. Hurricane says, I wonder if they'll let season ticket holders get a picture with it. Probably. It's very likely that that's going to happen. If they pay for it, I'm sure. Maybe that's the key here. It's like, maybe if nothing, maybe that's a compromise. Is like, Stan can charge the players. It costs $50,000 for you to take for you to rent the trophy for 4 days. If we do that, maybe the Nuggets can let this thing go. It's just kind of a bummer. Somebody asked, Grace asked, what does player focus have to do with the trophy? Because we don't celebrate teams as much as we celebrate players in the NBA. And that's always been the case. And it's been the case, well, not always. It's been the case for a long time, since really the 80s and especially with Jordan. There's a whole, what do we talk about? Do we talk about like that team has no championships or that player has no rings? Right. And so when I talk about like the focus being on the players, that's kind of part of it. Is we don't make the cup. We don't make the trophy into this big deal that you should be like, oh my gosh, that's the Larry O'Brien trophy. We don't do that. One, having it named after the former commissioner Larry O'Brien, who did a lot of good things for the league, but still not the best choice. Not like let's rename it after a player and be done. Like, rename that thing the Michael Jordan trophy and be done. Right. I'm sure LeBron would love that. Like, name it after a legendary figure and be done there. But two, like, it should be kind of recognized as like, this is a big deal, but it's not. Like, the championship rings are treated as a very, very big thing. But I also think that there has to be kind of a conversation about the way that this is kind of perceived. And I will say, though, there's been less events with the Nuggets than anything else. Maybe that changes as we get closer to the season, right? Maybe the Nuggets hold a bunch of preseason events where the trophy is out and kind of about. But it's kind of a bummer that, to me, I think it's a bummer that Jamal didn't get to take it back to Kitchener, or that AG doesn't get to take it home, or that it doesn't get passed around. I would have loved to have seen DeAndre Jordan with it on his yacht in the Baltic Sea. Like, I would have loved to have seen that, because he's a big fan of the Mediterranean and the Baltic. Ted, if the Nuggets actually get Dave on a ring, I will forgive them some. That's a good point. A lot of them are going to wind up with those other rings. I am curious to find out who gets a ring and who doesn't. Should be an exciting kind of moment. But overall, I do think that probably this was a blown opportunity by the Nuggets, and a pretty it's a layup. Just let Jamal take the trophy to Kitchener, please. It's Kitchener. That's what most people would say, that when I ask about Kitchener, is like, come on, man, they don't have much. Let the folks in Kitchener have the trophy. I think that'd be for the best. On the other side, I want to talk about the shape of the Western Conference. Folks were surprised when I had the Mavericks as high as I did. I'll talk about why and why that's probably going to change between now and the start of the season. We'll talk about that. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about Colin Gillespie and what his season might look like for the Nuggets. We'll do that when we return on Locked On Nuggets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The Denver Broncos are 6.5-point dogs this weekend at the Miami Dolphins. It is the Dolphins home opener. I looked at the numbers, and surprisingly, teams that have their home opener in week 3 do really badly against the spread, especially when they're favorites. The numbers are something like 35%. That said, like, I bet the Dolphins pretty much immediately, because I still think Denver's getting more credit than it kind of deserves in the market. But if you disagree, There's also maybe like a chance here for you to possibly get a 7 in the market. Wait for those key numbers, but it's 6.5. Like, I like the Dolphins here, but I don't think the Broncos is a bad bet based off of the spot. But boy, going to need a lot more than they've shown from the defense so far. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I put a 34-1 bet in this weekend on the Miami Dolphins to face the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. Love the finals matchups bets in the NBA, and I love them for NFL as well. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Tuesday. We'll do another live show on Wednesday night, and there'll be an episode with me and Swipa, if you're listening on the podcast, on Wednesday morning. Some of the Western Conference. So yesterday we were doing this kind of roundtable, and everyone kind of freaked out that I had the Mavericks as the number 2 team in the Western Conference. I want to talk a little bit about why I have that. So in part, I used to do like what pretty much everybody does, which is just kind of pencils in like, oh, I think they'll win this many games. Oh, I think they'll win this many games. And you kind of tweak up or down. Because I work so much in the betting space, I started going to a model. Like, I've got a number that spits out what I think that their expected point differential should be based off of the stuff that I value, which is half court and transition numbers. By those numbers, surprisingly, it shocked me too. Dallas's numbers were terrific last season, even with the tank. And the reason those numbers were so good is that when they won by a large margin, and they lost a lot of coin flip games. Their clutch performance was really poor. Now, that doesn't say that doesn't matter or that they're all coin flips, but they probably lost more games than Dallas should have. So I have a hard time when I look at how they lost so many games last season after having watched them, dropping them after what they did in the offseason, picking up Grant Williams and Seth Curry and Omax in the draft. Like, the draft was supposed to be really good. Derek Lively, another big man for them. Luka obviously coming like a little bit more in shape, even though he's a little bit banged up now, coming out of FIBA. So I had to upgrade them. And if they start so high and I upgrade them, I only upgrade them a little bit. That's how they wind up where they're at in this. Versus the Nuggets, I had to downgrade them because their number wasn't great to begin with last season for the regular season. Again, this is regular season basketball. This has nothing to do with, I think, of like how good these teams are. If you're like, rank the best teams in the Western Conference, my first answer is the Denver Nuggets, number 1. Like, who's the best team in the Western Conference? The Denver Nuggets. No question. I think there's a gap between the Nuggets and everybody else. Does that mean that I think the Nuggets are going to win the most games? No, because I don't think that's how the regular season works. And what I try and do is be as accurate in predictions as possible, try and follow the best process at least to try and determine what's going to happen in the regular season. And when we look at that first month and that last month of the season for the Nuggets, I don't throw those out. I understand why you as a fan would be like, Matt, they weren't trying. I don't think they'll try all this season. Why would I do that? The Mavericks project really well based off of how they played last season, and they got a little bit better. Now, that said, when I start to get into, I'm doing like win total stuff right now. I'm going through every single team and determining how it helps. The process of doing win totals helps me determine what I think of these teams. And when I start thinking about Dallas, the number one thing that comes to mind for me is I'm like, man, I don't know about their 5-man units. Like, their talent's good. They're going to have a great offense because Luka and Kyrie is going to have a great offense. I hate their coaching, hate it, hate everything about their coaching approach. And if I look at their 5-man lineup and I go Kyrie, Luka, THJ for now, barring a trade, Grant Williams, Dwight Powell, that's their likely starting 5. Like, that's probably who they're starting. Don't like that. So, like, even though they have all these pieces I like Josh Green and Jaden Hardy and Seth Curry, I don't know how much they're going to play or what units they're going to play. And there's not a lineup that I go, oh, that makes more sense. They don't have those kind of combinations. So that to me is like really difficult of it. Ted says, Matt, you're skeptical of the Nuggets depth. Look at the Mavs depth chart. Okay. I would actually challenge you on this. They have Rashawn Holmes, who is a perfectly serviceable backup center for him to play, along with Maxi Kleba. Those two would immediately be the backup centers on the Denver Nuggets. Rashawn Holmes or Maxi Kleba would immediately be the backup centers on the Nuggets. They have Josh Green and Jaden Hardy on the wings. Christian Brown plays above both those guys. Am I absolutely certain that Peyton Watson plays above Jaden Hardy or Josh Green? No. I think Josh Green was better than Peyton Watson last season. Period, end dot. No question. They have Seth Curry coming off the bench. Would I rather have Seth Curry or Reggie Jackson? I'd rather have Seth Curry. 100%. 100 times out of 100, I'd rather have Seth Curry than Reggie Jackson. Even with my concerns that Seth is washed because the Nets were basically like, sorry, man, it's over. I'd still rather have Seth for a number of reasons, including fit in the staggered lineups. So the depth here, I really do think that hurts a number of things here. I do think the Mavericks are a little bit deeper than Denver, and that factors into this conversation as well. One of the reasons I have Memphis number one, and somebody mentioned this, that you have a team with their best player on the shelf for 25 games. The Grizzlies have been great without Ja the last 2 seasons. They win games. I'm projecting a massive jump from Desmond Bane. I cannot be more in on Desmond Bane. I think he takes a leadership step this season because he's going to be the best player on the floor to start the year. Marcus Smart fills in a lot of what they're going to need. They're going to play gritty, grimy ball with a lot of defense. Their half-court defense was superb. No matter what happened to Jaren in the World Cup, Jaren is a phenomenal NBA defender. He was worthy of winning DPOY. I think Bam Adebayo is the best defender in the NBA. Jaren absolutely was deserving of DPOY. So they're going to get Steven Adams back, who I love. Memphis to me looks like, I think that they are underrated and that their ceiling is going to be way better because there were signs at the end of last season and that the front office and coaching staff recognized their half-court offense was not good enough. And they'll get that, I think, from in the 20s to in the teens. Again, just because I think Memphis is going to have the number one record, if you tell me that Denver is the 4 seed in the second round facing Memphis in the 1 seed, Memphis almost has to be favored there based off of that differential. They almost, not definitely, but they have to be favored at least by a little bit, probably minus 125. I'm immediately betting Denver. No hesitation. Fully healthy. I am betting Denver immediately. But about regular season, I do think that even with Ja missing 25 games, I think Memphis' ceiling is a little bit higher because they won't coast. They still have stuff that they need to prove. And this is they have a lot of motivation to prove that they're not a joke because everyone laughed at them in the playoffs and deservingly so. This is where it gets kind of weird is after that, because when I look at the Pacific Division and I try and figure out who's going to be good, I have a really hard time. Phoenix, I think, is going to be good. I think Phoenix will be a top 4 seed somewhere in there just because they're going to be so good offensively. I have some concerns because they don't shoot a lot from 3. Vogel's teams have never had a season. Sorry, not never. Vogel's teams since 2014 have not had a season where his teams took more threes than the opponent. Not once. His teams always are at a 3-point disadvantage, and it's a pretty considerable one. So he's not going to fix their biggest problem, which is they don't shoot enough threes. It's still going to be Book and KD and Beal shooting a ton of mid-range shots. If we get to the first 2 weeks of the season or even preseason, quite honestly, and they're bombing from deep, I'm going to upgrade Phoenix quite a bit. Defensively, I have worries. And if you ask me, okay, Matt, what about that depth question with Denver and Phoenix? That's where I do think I think you're probably right. Phoenix's depth is very interesting. They got so many kudos over the offseason. And I like Keita Bates-Diop. I think Denver should have stuck around on him and given him a chance. And his numbers defensively are amazing. Don't know if I can buy him being a 40% shooter like he was with San Antonio. If he is, that really helps. They lost Torrey Craig. Drew Eubanks, some good, some bad when I kind of dug into it. I don't like the Eric Gordon pickup whatsoever. And one of the things I'm looking for is if Eric Gordon starts in the preseason, if they're starting 5 for game 1 of the preseason, if they're healthy, has Eric Gordon, I'm immediately going to fade that team. So how Vogel handles this, I think is going to be really interesting. I think the Suns are going to be top 4, but there's a lot of ways that this doesn't go as well as it needs to, considering what they've invested. The Lakers I'm having a really hard time with because I don't want to underrate them out of pure resistance to how over discussed they are. But when I look at trying to find ways that they're going to win 50 games, I have a really hard time getting there. Just based off of the fact of I can't imagine them having their guys healthy enough. It would be such an outlier historically for guys their age and body type and these specific players for them to play heavy amounts. And the rest of the Lakers team is pretty good, but they're also getting a lot of credit for the roster being pretty good compared to terrible like it was to start last year and being misconstrued as awesome. So don't know what to do with the Lakers. The Warriors, I have a lot of concerns about because they're banking that last year was an outlier essentially based off of the kids being the problem, that Wiseman and Poole were such bad attitudes that they were the issue with Golden State. And when I dig in and I look at everything that went on, I have a lot more concerns. And I am deeply worried that they may have crossed the apex of when they are still those championship level players that we've seen. So that's the Warriors. And then there's the Kings, who quite honestly, we talk about injuries last year. The Nuggets had way worse injury luck than the Kings. Now, I've done the numbers over the last 10 years, and it doesn't necessarily their average. If you have a really good or bad injury year, it doesn't catch up with you the next year. And this will not surprise anybody that understands basic math. But like, it is very rare that there is a correction to these things proportionally. You will just move back towards the average. But if the Kings move back towards the average and they don't have the benefit of the 3-point game win percentage they had last season, there's a lot of indicators that the Kings are probably going to slide back into the mid to high 40s. What's really interesting, I think, when we talk about this, and the reason I wanted to bring it up today is how I view the Western Conference as my prior going in. And I am not attached to this. It can be totally wrong. But when I look at the Western Conference and how it played last season, and I adjust for the moves that were made in the offseason, what's interesting is that for years and years and years, we have had the same kind of model, which is a couple of teams at the top of 55 plus. Like there'll be like 160 win team and then like a 55 win team. And then a few teams in the 50s and then like a big drop. And what we saw last season was this clumping where the Nuggets won with the fewest. They won the Western Conference 1 seed with the fewest wins of any team in decades. And then like a little bit of a gap, right? And then some near 50s and then some high 40s and then some mid 40s and some low 40s. Everything got very much smushed together. And I think that we'll honestly see more of that this season, in part because the tanking that went on for Wembanyama won't be as present. The draft class isn't as good. And the combination of the play-in tournament and the flattened lottery odds, I do think keeps teams in contention later. It still makes March a disaster because everybody's in a different spot and nobody's really focused on winning games. But in general, I think that there's a good situation here of it's probably going to be pretty close. The reason I think that helps Denver, it both helps and hurts Denver, because it makes it less likely that we're going to have that outlier that I talked about on yesterday's show of 60, right? It makes it that less likely. And if you're in a range with a bunch of other teams, if it's tight within 3 or 4 games, tiebreakers matter and injuries matter, and you can very easily go from like 1 to 4 in the span of a month if all those teams are kind of clumped together. So I'm very curious to see what the West looks like from a shape of its standpoint. Because when I look at all these teams, and there will be injuries and there will be trades and there will be drama and all this stuff that changes the complexion of the Western Conference. But when I look at it, I have a hard time identifying teams that are going to be outright bad. Houston's still going to be bad. They got better. They're still going to be bad. So the Spurs are still going to be bad. They got better. They're still going to be bad. After that, I don't know. Like Dallas needs to win. They invested to win. The Pelicans need to win. They were the number 1 seed in December. They just got hurt. Those are like 2 of the bad teams. Those teams missed the playoffs. OKC is going to be better. They got Chet back, and they got all this internal development. They have actual intentions to win this year. Like, there are so many good teams. And then you get like the Wolves, right? So I don't know who's going to be bad, which if everybody in the West is going to be good, and they won't all be, there will be a couple of teams that will fade. But they will probably clump together, and that makes things really unstable. And I'll tell you this, all those things I talk about over and over again with win your home games, win your division games, and win your games versus teams under 500, going to be all that more important this season. Only going to make that more important. Grace mentions Utah. Portland will be bad. She mentions Portland. Utah, I think, will be okay. I think Utah will probably surprise again and be decent and probably tank a little bit less. I think they'll be pretty good this year. Not good, but okay. That's what I kind of think about Utah. On the other side, let's talk about Colin Gillespie and what his season kind of looks like after a lost year in 2023. We'll do that on the other side. But first, I need to tell you about the Jase case. I get respiratory infections all the time here in Colorado. It's a real problem. Since I moved into the altitude, every year, just about, I get respiratory infections, which can linger. And my immune system, as I now am over 40, doesn't kick them the way that I used to when I was 25. And so I often need an antibiotic, but that could be hard to get if your doctor doesn't have time for an appointment, or if he's out of town, or if he's sick. These things can get delayed, or sometimes doctors can want to wait a little bit. Like, well, let's see how you're doing. But if you're really struggling and trying to deal with it, having that kind of emergency help, I think, really comes in handy. With storm shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, and supply chain issues, you need to be prepared more now than ever. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase, medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Tuesday. If you are up for it, we'll have a live show for you on Wednesday night, or Tuesday night rather, as well. And the show will be in your podcast feeds tomorrow. Me and Swipe, let me know that what you guys want to talk about. You can catch us on Twitter at Locked On Nuggets. So about Colin Gillespie. So Colin, I was the lowest of anybody on his summer league performance last year in the 2022 summer league. I thought that he was a little bit too passive. I thought that he was his shot selection wasn't great, but Adam and pretty much all the DNVR guys were really impressed with him. Katie Wingy was too, and that made me kind of like reevaluate some things. Then obviously Colin suffers the broken leg and he misses the entire season. And Colin really did. He put in all sorts of work to be able to get back, and he put in the work. I will say this: a lot of guys, when their season is lost, will not be out there doing the pregame warmups every single game, especially if they're not a starter and they're not going to be playing anyway. You got time. Colin was out before every single game doing warm-ups, going through shooting drills. Put the absolute work in. I thought he struggled in summer league. Somebody kind of mentioned that they thought that he was better than people described. I thought he was pretty rough. I don't think that summer league team was very good, and I don't think it was very well built to show Colin's talents. I also think that a full year, and now summer especially, of Colin working with the Nuggets and being around NBA players will help him a lot for this adjustment. I tend to like guys that get a redshirt year, and he got it for injury, which obviously means that he didn't get to practice and play and do all these things. But he saw and learned so much last year. And I think that he brings a lot to the table that I think the Nuggets are going to need. One of the biggest areas of concern for me is point guard. Because if Jamal's got knee soreness, which he's going to have from time to time, basically for the rest of his career, like spoiler alert, guys with ACL injuries tend to have knee soreness the rest of the way. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't mean that he's going to have injuries, just going to have soreness. And why wouldn't you be cautious with that, even with the new resting mandates? He will still need time off. You slide Reggie Jackson into the starters. We don't like that overall here at Locked On Nuggets. We're in general like, no, that's going to go. But then who becomes the backup? And from Adam's perspective, it's obviously Jalen Pickett, who then gets to run the second unit. And that's good. But you want to have options. And what if Reggie gets hurt? Like, what if Jamal and Reggie are both hurt? What if you have cluster injuries? You want a little bit of depth, which means that there's an opportunity there maybe for Colin Gillespie to either secure the backup point guard position ahead of Jalen, or to secure kind of a back combo where one of those guys is going to get an opportunity. And Colin's ability, I think, to run the offense, and particularly like his shooting efficiency, he's a really efficient player. And I think that that's going to be really good for what the Nuggets need. I think they need a low risk, high efficiency player somewhere in the backcourt. And outside of KCP. And that to me is absolutely Colin Gillespie. As I think he'll be very efficient. And I think Jalen Pickett can maybe make more plays for others and has more stuff that he can do than Colin. But I also think that Gillespie is going to be able to come in and really contribute. I also think that he'll be fine to go to the G League, get some more reps in, and then fill in a spot. But the more I've kind of thought about it and gone over some of his college tape, the kind of higher I am on Colin Gillespie as a potential option to be able to get in here and actually give some minutes as far as the Nuggets backup goes. I think that having Gillespie as a possible option in the event that Reggie Jackson doesn't work out, in the event that Jalen Pickett doesn't work out, if one of those guys doesn't get work out or gets injured, I actually think Colin's in a really good place to be able to contribute. I think that Summer League is probably a really tough environment for him. And I wonder if Colin had been able to play late in the season in some of those low stakes games versus the Spurs, if he could have been in a good environment to maybe give them a boost and provide a little bit. And so I'm pretty bullish, I think, now on where Colin sits with this roster relative to where I was maybe even a year ago. I think I'm actually higher on him after further research and study. And that's, I think, really promising because it means that, like we talked about with the depth, maybe that's one area that I don't have to be as concerned about with Denver. All right, it's gonna wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets for a Tuesday. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to check out the show on Wednesday with me and Swipa. And then I will be back with you for another show, I think on Thursday. It'll either be me or Swipa, depending on if we can get Swipa set up with all the stuff that he needs. And then Friday, you'll be able to catch Adam and Swipa together. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have yourselves a great week. Make sure to give us those 5-star reviews, the like and subscribe on YouTube. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.